So Ronnie, let's start at the beginning of your time in Black Sabbath. You're coming out of tremendously successful band with Rainbow. When did it first come on your radar? Where was the first approach that there would be interest in you becoming the new singer in Black Sabbath?
Well, it all really started with a conversation I had with Tony on the phone at a time when he was about to leave Black Sabbath, and was introduced to Tony by then Sharon Arden, who, of course, Sharon Osbourne, Ozzy's wife. And one thing led to another, and was invited into the studio that they were using. Tony said, well, I want to play something for you, and so they strapped on their instruments and they played me the beginning of what was a song called that became Children of the Sea. Could you do anything with this? I said, sure, give me a few minutes and I'll see what I can do. Put something together. I sang the song, we did it. Tony at that point said, I want to play with this guy. And that was the very beginning of it all.
How well did you know the guys in Sabbath before you became a member of the band? Was there a personal connection, or was it just fellow musicians that you had kept an eye on and were aware of what they were doing?
In Tony's case, because we had spoken on the phone, I felt I had some connection with him. But I'd never met Bill before, I'd never met Geese before. Met Billy that night, the night I told you that I went to the place where they were rehearsing, and instantly fell in love with Bill. Just the sweetest man I think I've ever met. A lovely guy. And Geezer's Geezer. He was, very low key and a bit standoffish for me, because I'm not a standoffish person, and Tony's not standoffish, nor is Billy. But that just happened to be Geezer's personality. Once you get to know him, you find out that's not what he is at all. So I didn't really have that much of a personal connection with them. So that was my first knowledge of them as people, and again, that's why it took me a while to make that decision. Do I want to do this? Because I didn't really know them as people.
It really was, I would imagine, for you something you really had to think long and hard about. I imagine there were reservations on a number of different levels before you made that move, right?
There were, and of course one of them had to be, do you want to go into a situation that has not been successful for a while? Because there must have been reasons why it wasn't successful. And did I want to make myself part of that unsuccessful pattern? So I thought about that a little bit, but it wasn't that for me. It was never that for me. It's never been about that. It's always ever been about the music and the people that I'm playing with. People first. If I don't like them, I don't want anything to do with them. So that was a consideration, and musically, of course, was a consideration as well. But in starting to write the things, just that particular night, I loved what Tony's ideas were. I loved where he was coming from.
Let's get into that recording of that first very landmark album, Heaven and Hell, which of course would later become the name that the band now uses. Tell us how that went. Were you comfortable? Were you still apprehensive at that point? What were you thinking?
Well, I think the most devastating thing was that 2 or 3 days after we had decided that we were going to do this together, and Ozzy was now not going to be there, Geezer left. And so suddenly it was just kind of Tony and Bill and myself. So it made it a lot more difficult. I thought we were all, a band with a bass player and a singer and a guitar player and a drummer, and it was just going to go smoothly. But who knew whether he was ever going to come back or not? And at that point, we didn't think he would. But Tony was still very positive about it. Bill was very positive about it. So we started to do some more writing. Then we brought another bass player, and I suggested Craig Gruber, who had played with me before, who was a fine bass player. He came in to play and stayed with us all the way through going to Miami to record the album, at which point Geezer called Tony and said, I'm really miserable. And if you think you guys would want me back again, I'd really love to come back again. And so Tony approached me and said, Geezer called, and whatever you think, Ronnie. And I said, it's not the same without Geezer, of course. So Geezer came back, so that made life easier. But it was a lot more difficult before that, because we were now writing almost without a plan. We were just writing. Is that good? Well, I don't know. Sounds good to me. It's nicer when you have all the parts of the puzzle together, because then you can make those judgments together.
Was there a sense that this album was going to be this special landmark album, or was there a sense that, well, it's going to take a little while to break down some doors, maybe establish some new fans that are going to welcome you as the lead singer? Or did you feel immediately, we've really got something special here?
I think we were probably all a little bit afraid of what it was going to be. Well, will it be accepted? We don't know. We would go to the local strip club after we'd record one of the songs. We'd go to the strip club and they would play it, and the strippers would dance to it, and if they liked it, we knew we had a good one. Did Heaven and Hell, they loved that. Oh, they just absolutely loved that
The song
one.
Heaven and Hell.
Oh, they loved that one. They couldn't wait to dance
That's
to
a
that
long
one.
dance.
Yeah, but they loved it, and all the rest of the songs we brought in, they loved as well, and so it was a great way for us to gauge what was going on. But I think we were all a little bit afraid. Is this going to be accepted? And we were so lucky that it was right from the get-go. And everyone who heard it said that too. This is brilliant. But I don't think we ever wanted to take the chance of believing that, because we didn't want to be let down by that. But again, in retrospect, the hindsight is a wonderful thing. Yeah, boy, we knew it was going to be a smash, but we know we didn't know that at all.
Right. And looking back on Heaven and Hell now, do you have 2 or 3 tracks that are your favorites, that are most personal to you, or that you like the most for some reason?
Well, Children of the Sea, of course, because it was the first one, and I love the song, and everyone else has loved that song. Heaven and Hell, without a doubt, it's a song I always wanted to write. It was a title that I first heard done by a band called the Easy Beats, and the Easy Beats, of Friday on My Mind fame, were a band that we toured with, in a band I had called Ronnie Dio and the Prophets, which became the Elf Band. We toured with them, and they were just so influential to us, and one of the songs they had written was a song called Heaven and Hell, and I always wanted to write a song with that title, so that was a title that I put forth to the guys and had a direct idea about it as well. And then luckily Tony came up with this wonderful riff for it, and so it became a song that I was very proud of. So those two, of course, were that.
So the album is done. The album comes out, Heaven and Hell, and then of course it's time for you to kind of establish your turf on the live stage as a member of Black Sabbath. Tell us about those first early shows as a member of the band and what you were feeling taking the stage, the audience reaction to you.
Well, I was very confident in what we were doing. At that particular point, we only had the 8 songs. I think it was 8 songs from Heaven and Hell. It's all we had of what we had done together. So we were doing, obviously, Black Sabbath and Paranoid and Iron Man, the things from the others, which made it a bit more difficult with the diehard fans. And so for me, it was a matter of looking out at an audience and seeing that all the time. I spent probably the first 2 or 3 weeks, that's all I ever saw, until we got to Philadelphia. Played the Spectrum, and someone unleashed this big banner that said, Philadelphia loves the Reverend Ronnie James Dio, and I never got the finger again after that. I don't know whether I can attribute that to the banner or to the people in Philadelphia, but it stopped after that, and maybe it was just 2 weeks or 3 weeks was enough, and maybe the word got out that I was okay.
So the touring is done. It's time to make a second album, and that album is of course Mob Rules. Tell us about the approach going in. You're feeling a little more confident. You've got the touring behind you. You've got the album. There's more of a chemistry. You know your bandmates a little bit better. How do you feel set the stage if you can, going into that recording?
Well, we had a different drummer at that point. Vinny Appice came in at that point. Billy had gone. Bill didn't want to tour anymore, so Billy left. And so there we were, kind of divided yet again. And we approached the writing very much differently than we did the first one. Geezer had gone, so we wrote in a very controlled environment, in a living room with little amplifiers. And with Mob Rules, we hired a studio, and we just turned up as loud as possible, and just smashed through it all. So it made for a different kind of an attitude. More difficult for me to have to sing over all that and try to create while all that's going on. So it was a lot harder for me than the first album was. And a lot of times success breeds problems. And that happened. I felt that really did happen, that all of the bad things that could be used were used, from drug abuse to mental abuse. I just found that it all happened. So it didn't make for that happy an album, not happy like Heaven and Hell was. Heaven and Hell was the sky's the limit, and Mob Rules is a bit more contained. Oh, we need to do this and we need to do that. And once you've had a successful album like Heaven and Hell, of course you're going to compare it. People are going to compare it to that first successful album, and so are you. I just found it a lot more difficult album. The process was a lot more difficult for me. But and again, I'm proud of it. I think it's a great album.
Some of those tensions and differences that you said started to creep in during the recording of the Mob Rules album. Did they then manifest themselves on the subsequent tour for that album? Because Live Evil, the double album that was a result of the Mob Rules tour, is often pointed to as the album where it was kind of a breaking point for you, which is kind of drove you out of the band in some regards. Can you elaborate on that, if that is indeed true, and what the reasons were why that live album was such a... Was it the live album itself that was a touchy thing to you, or was it just a cumulative thing of what had gone on up to that point that you decided to leave?
I thought that the album was had excellent qualities. I thought that before we started to mix it, it was going to just be wonderful and so much fun to do. But during the very initial mixing of that particular album is when it fell apart, and I had no idea why. Only at the time that Vinny and I were, it was kind of Vinny and I versus Tony and Geese at that point. Again, I had no idea why. I never knew what I did to do that. I've heard a lot of rumors, that I'm a control freak, and it was perhaps my fault because I was trying to be in control, but I never was.
Well, there's rumors that you would sneak into the studio, and alter things. True or false?
Oh, that's complete and total bullshit. How could that possibly be? All we did was go in at the time we were supposed to be there, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So when we went for the first 2 days, everybody was there at 2 o'clock, and then the third day was only Vinny and I there. And we just couldn't wait around any longer, so we left at, 4 o'clock. And when we left at 4 o'clock, the other two turned up. And same thing the next day, and same thing the next day, until we both got a call that said, I think we should let Tony mix this album. In other words, your services are not required anymore. I said, okay, well, I guess the end of that one then, and that was the end of that one.
That would lead and launch you into tremendous success with the Dio Band,
yeah,
with yourself and Vinny. So fast forwarding through that tremendous period in your career, revisiting Sabbath once again for Dehumanizer,
right,
and the reunion that would come. How did that happen? Who called who, and who said maybe now would be the right time to revisit and pick things up with Ronnie again?
Well, to my recollection and to the way I think this happened, Geezer was the one who made the first overture. Geezer came to a Dio show that we had done in Minneapolis. So Geezer and I talked that night at length in the bar in Minneapolis, and he said that he had spoken to Tony, and Tony really would like to think about doing it again. So that planted the seed, and from there it became something that we decided to do. And so we started to write, and we wrote the songs for Dehumanizer. But it wasn't the most happy situation I've ever been in. Once again, it was that there was something wrong. There was just not this openness. It just wasn't there. Just the total acceptance that we had in heaven and hell, the fact that here we were creating again and should have been so happy to do it, it spilled over into the tour that we did as well. And the tour, I was told, again, not asked, at the beginning of the tour, that we were now not going to be headlining our own show in Los Angeles, which I thought was important for us, but that we were going to be opening for Ozzy, who at that point, his camp had said a lot of very bad things about all of us, certainly myself included, but about Tony as well. And I'm a band guy. And if you say something about a guy who's in a band with me, you're going to pay the price for it, because I'm not going to stand for that. I mean, I live and die with the people in my band, no matter what has happened in the past. And so I said, no, I refuse to do that. I will not open for someone who has treated us that badly. I can deal with it, I'm thick-skinned, but I won't let that happen to Tony. I think that's unfair. So no, I refuse to do it. Well, they wanted to do that. So my thoughts were, you probably want to do it because you're going to announce a reformation of the band again. Probably time that you're going to do that. You could probably make a lot more money than what we're doing. So off they went, and that was the end of it. And I was no longer in that band, twice. So that's the way that one ended, and so be it.
Flashing forward now, once again, through another chunk of 12, 13, 14 years, something like that, we have Black Sabbath with Ronnie James Dio, the Dio Years CD coming out, which I imagine was the catalyst for the third and current reunion.
Every time we've gotten back together, it's always been as though we had never left, like we'd seen each other the day before, because we really liked each other a lot. And through all the things that I've said, all I'm trying to do in this is just tell the truth. I'm not carping or having a bitch and a moan about it. I'm not doing that at all. It's just what the truth is. And once we decided to do that, then we wrote 2 songs, which we were supposed to write 2. We wrote 3, and it was just so much fun. It was just, wow, it was just great. And we heard the songs, after we wrote them, Tone and I went, wow, there we are again. Geese heard them, played on, went, great, just great. From there it was, maybe we should do an album. Okay, let's do an album. And we did, and this was exactly the way it was supposed to be. Just like the early days. It was just like Heaven and Hell again. A lot more fun. And we survive within the things that we all are now. There's no jealousy, there's no one whispering behind anyone's back at all. That just never happens. The friendship just supersedes what we do as musicians now. And that's always been the most important thing to me. I can always count on any of them for anything that I need. So this is a wonderful, wonderful time of all of our lives. Heaven and Hell has made a great difference in just my attitude as a human being now. So I'm just so happy that it did happen for us all.